Welcome to Ask the Educator, a podcast brought to you by Healthmark Industries. Are you a sterile processing technician or manager? Maybe you work in infection prevention or biomedical engineering. Whether you're a frontline tech, endoscopy tech, or nurse or surgical services administrator, you undoubtedly have influence in medical device processing at your facility. In each episode, we speak with experts from the Healthmark Clinical Affairs team, industry leaders, or special guests from the trenches to answer your questions and bring you relevant industry information, equipping you for excellence in medical device processing. My name is Kevin Anderson, and I will be your host. Now let's get started. All right, welcome to the podcast, everyone. For this episode, I have a special guest joining me. He began his career as an SPD technician back in 2009. He then served as an instrument database specialist, department manager, system director of various SPDs across the U.S. His department was an HPN CSSPD Department of the Year in 2016. He has been a founder of 2 statewide ISHM chapters, conference speaker, a well-known industry writer, blogger, and social media connoisseur. His passion is seeing frontline sterile processing professionals equipped to fight dirty every instrument every time. By now, you've probably guessed that the guest today is none other than the founder and president of Beyond Clean, Hank Balch. Hank, it is about time we've had you on the podcast, so thanks for joining me on this episode.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on, Kevin. And, one of the perks of being fairly active on social media is I can just go invite myself to things. And so I decided one day, I kept seeing all these great episodes come out from you. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to wait around for an invite. I'm just going to ask, can I come on your show? Please, let me on your show.
Oh, I appreciate that, Hank. And obviously, yes, the door will always be open. But yes, and it's great having you on. And for this episode, it's funny because I really wanted to dig into a topic that is really underrated, I believe, in leadership in general, and big time in sterile processing and as an industry. And I believe there are many skills we need to develop if we want to become that true leader in SPD or in ND industry for that matter. And one of those skills, I believe, is storytelling, which is why it was so perfect to have you on at this time and for this topic. I know it's a passion of yours based on the 200 plus articles and all the different social media outlets you're involved in. I mean, you've really, really done a great job telling the story of our industry, and I really appreciate it. So, Hank, can you just share why you think this storytelling part is so important?
Yeah. So let's start off with defining that term a little bit.
Sure.
In the South growing up, when you told stories, that meant that you're telling lies, right? So we're not talking about, storytelling in that way. We're telling the truth, but, we're telling the truth in a way that has some emotion behind it. And in the early part of my career, back in 2009, when I got started, I was already into stories, into poetry, kind of that, literary nerd a little bit, like to read a lot of books.
Sure.
And in consuming content in the industry, I realized real quickly that there's a lot of technical information out there. There's certification handbooks, there's guidelines, there's IFUs. But back in 2009, there were not a lot of popular style writers who were writing for the normal technician in the industry in a way that you would want to sit down and read, like after work or on the weekends.
Sure.
And so because I had that passion outside of work and a little bit of a skill set in writing, I decided if it's not there, why not try to get started? So I began writing a couple of years into the industry after I'd gotten certified and a couple of years of experience. And the feedback early on, I think you were even there on LinkedIn, right? When I first got started writing some of these articles,
Yes.
The feedback was almost immediate.
Sure.
Folks started responding and engaging and saying, man, I love this idea. I love the delivery. I love the topics that you're bringing up. And so for me, it was kind of an experience. I didn't see this happening. I wanted it to happen, and I wanted it to see it grow in the industry. But your question kind of came back to why is this important in our departments, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is this skill
Sure.
for managers, for technicians, for whoever, whatever your job title is, the ability to tell a story. And I guess I'll kind of couch it in maybe philosophical terms first. So, like, the most important philosophical question is, why am I here? And that's a story question.
Yes.
In philosophy, in religion, everything else, you cannot answer that question with pure facts. If you say, well, you're here biologically because, mommy, daddy, DNA, etc.,
Sure.
that's actually not why people ask that question. Like, no one's asking that question because they want a biological answer or a scientific answer. Like, they want to know, where do they fit in the bigger story of everything?
Sure.
Right? The universe, life, all that jazz. Like, why am I here? Hank Balch, like, why am I here? Well, to bring that into sterile processing, we've all got that same question in sterile processing. Why am I in this department, in this industry, in this position? Why am I here? So we're all asking that. And the art or the skill of storytelling is answering that in a way that hits home, that connects the mind to, I'm here to pay the bills. I'm here because it is a job, right? And I'm here to grow, etc. To the heart of, I'm here for the patient. I'm here for a purpose. I'm here because of my passion. That's that connection between the heart and the head, and that happens through storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up the sort of genesis of when you started writing and all of that. I know it wasn't necessarily back to the leadership thing, but it is important because those are skills that we build on, whether it's just drawing people in and getting them interested in the industry as a whole. Because, yeah, to your point, we do have a lot of technical writing, and those are great. There's actually nothing wrong with that. But I think it's that kind of storytelling writing that you have been so good at that helps draw people in and actually does get them a little bit engaged in thinking about work-related activities, even when they're maybe not at work. And to segue back into that leadership thing, I think it is important for us as sterile processing professionals to be able to tell the story of our department, tell the story of our individual purpose, or why, to your point, why did we latch on to sterile processing in the first place? Like, I'm an OR nurse, that's like where I started. How did I end up dedicating so much time and so much of my career in sterile processing? I mean, there's a lot of reasons that play into these things for each individual, but also for the department. And I think it's really imperative that people learn how to do this stuff, whether it's, again, for themselves to draw others into the industry or to develop others in the industry or to showcase what's going on in their department. I think so often people think nothing is going on because we're not telling them what's going on. And part of that is hopefully using story, not just, like you said, facts and figures and things like that. It kind of goes together, bring them both together, use some data, use some storytelling, and then we can grow and show what our department is doing and maybe apply for an award or even an internal award at your health system, things like that, right? I mean, this is stuff that you've already done in your history.
Mm-hmm. I think the word that has not come up yet, but needs to be inserted here is culture. And a couple of seasons ago, I did an interview on my podcast. I was interviewed by Justin. I think it was like the first time ever.
Yeah.
And then I did that.
Yeah.
And the topic of that episode was building a sterile processing culture and kind of differentiating that, because we use culture all the time in our education, sterile processing. We understand the value of a strong department culture, happy culture, et cetera. But what I was arguing for and still am arguing for today is the need to develop an industry-wide culture that, again, is answering that fundamental question. Why are we here? Like, we say all the time that our industry needs more recognition. Okay, why? And what does that look like to folks on the outside? And you can't make that case without telling an engaging, emotional, provocative story on the impact that we have on patient lives, on the ability for providers in the operating room to focus on what they're doing, right? To give the artist in the OR their brush, right?
Yes.
Who is Michelangelo without the sculpting, right? And all the sculpting tools and everything else. Like without those things, our partners in the operating room, in clinics and respiratory therapy and all those places cannot do their jobs. And we can't simply say, well, we clean instruments. It's very important. Trust us. Now recognize us. That convinces no one. But telling those next level stories that tying in emotion and tying that again between the head and the heart, that convinces and it sticks with people. Like one of those arguments that I've made in the past about just being creative with how we say things. It is important and it's worth taking time to sit down and think, do I call this the care and handling of scopes project? Or do I call this hope for scopes, right? Like hope for scopes is going to give you much more runway and emotional capital to spend with your team and with your customers than the care and handling of scopes project. That's just how language works.
I know. And I feel like that's so funny that you bring that up because it seems to come so naturally to you. And so many of us, obviously have really taken to those kinds of things that you've written because let's face it, I mean, you've shared countless examples of that in your writing. And it's like, I could probably sit down for 5 hours and not come up with something so clever in 3 words. And it's like, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, that care and handling project sounds pretty good, but hope for scopes. Now that is cool. That's definitely a tagline that I believe not only could your team rally around and easily speak to, but it would also be easy for people in the OR to understand and kind of want to know more and inquire about what does that mean? What exactly are you doing that's going to give us hope for our scopes, and that's right. Really important. I think that's a great idea that really needs to be really tried out and really experimented with for people, especially like people like me. Let's face it, we're a little bit challenged when it comes to that, but that doesn't mean you can't practice and you can't get some input from your team and the more creative types in your team and things like that. I mean, what else would you encourage people to do in order to develop this sort of skill? Because some of us, we think, oh yeah, we don't have it, we're never going to have it. But really, truly, I believe most things are skills that we can be developing in ourselves. But how would you say would be the best way for people that feel like they can't do it? How should they go about developing that?
Mm-hmm. My first answer would be don't cut yourself too short, right? Don't be too hard on yourself because humans by nature are storytellers. We love listening to stories and we tell stories every single day. And especially if you're a parent, like you'll get this, right? Like no one has to teach you how to read a book to your children, right? Or how to creatively like tell a story that gets their imagination going. We do that in a situation where there's no stress, like we know our kids are not going to judge us if we get the story mixed up or we forget things. Like sometimes they will, they'll bring it up and be like, actually, that's not how that story goes, Daddy. You left out this one big piece. But to bring it up to say, like, every single one of us is born with inherent creativity inside of us. Now, where people get into troubles, like they look out at folks who maybe have a better skill set at writing or speaking or video content or whatever else, and they compare themselves and say, oh, well, I can never be as good as Tom Cruise, right?
Right.
If I can't be as good as Tom Cruise, then I'm never going to make a video and I'm just going to give up.
Yep.
And so that comparison piece or that paralysis of perfection, like whatever you want to call that, really stops a lot of folks, I think, from just practicing the skill. Like you mentioned, like how do you develop it? Well, practice is a big part of it. The more stories you tell and the more opportunities that you take to connect the heart and the mind of your staff, right? So like, let's really make this concrete. You want your staff to do something today on second shift. You want them to get all the trays done and to really push themselves to uphold a high level of quality. but get that productivity going as well? Do you just say, hey guys, there's a lot of trays to do tonight. Please try to get them all done. You might say that, but I'm going to argue you shouldn't say that. You should get everyone together and say, we've got a mountain of trays in front of us. Today, we are going to climb that mountain together, because at the top of that mountain are all of these patients waiting for us tomorrow. They're waiting for sterile processing. You, me, Julie, Johnny, they're waiting for us to get this done, guys. And no one is going to do this for us. We have got to do it for them. Grandmas, moms, dads, babies, everybody's waiting on us tomorrow. We got to do it together. Let's go make it happen. Go take dominion of the sterile processing universe. Like that story, not that long, right? It took me 10, 20 seconds. Yep. Huge difference between the technical knowledge, the data, the information needs to get done, and a little bit of creativity to cast that vision to actually make people want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I already feel a little more inspired to pitch in and help after hearing that, but tackle that mountain. But I think it's really important, because not only would I feel a little bit more inspired to dig in and help and push myself, and I don't want to go down this other rabbit hole, but so many people are so quick to, basically blame their lack of motivation or lack of productivity or whatever it is based on things like external factors like pay and benefits and stuff like that. And it's like, well, I'm sorry guys, but I know you don't get paid enough, but I know there's lots of industries, lots of professionals out there that feel they don't get paid enough. But part of what inspires us and motivates us is those stories and those reasons why we need to pitch in and help our fellow people, whether it's a patient in our case, or maybe it's somebody else in somebody else's case. But I think that's really important. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, it goes above and beyond just monetary value. I've seen people get very big raises and you see very little in return in terms of from the raise, in terms of their productivity or quality or any of it. So I don't think money is something that somebody should be banking on as their source of motivation and things like that, and their reason why. Obviously, like you've mentioned before and other things, I mean, we all need money for our families and to take care of ourselves and things like that. But I think this storytelling and the stuff that gives us the reason why and the purpose for our work is where we're really going to draw from when we need that extra push and when we need to really drive quality in our departments.
Yeah. What I would say to that, and this goes back to a story, and I want to, that example that I gave a second ago about the mountain and the trade and the patients, that was 10, 20 seconds, as I said. Well, a story can be as short as a couple of words, right? So like one of the stories that we drive home every single day Beyond Clean is our company, tagline or slogan that says, "We fight dirty," period, right? So that's a sentence. So 3 words. That is a very deep, emotional, transcendent story. So it's we, right? It's not I.
Right.
Like I don't fight dirty because I can't fight dirty all by myself. It's we. It's a team. I need decontaminators. I need assemblers. I need sterilizers. I need bosses. I need people to pay the paychecks. I need people to order the stuff. Like we do it.
Yes.
It is a fight. It's like you said, this is not sitting on the beach in Mexico somewhere just chilling out and getting paid, right? It is a fight. We do fight every single day to bring these things from dirty to clean to sterile to the patient ready to go. And it's dirty.
It is
it's
dirty.
Not a pleasant, clean atmosphere, even on the clean side, on the sterile side. Like you're breaking a sweat with that steam just pouring out of those open autoclaves, right? Coming back at you, just heating up that whole area. Right. Like there's all kinds of things that are dirty about it, but we're fighting it and we're fighting it together. And that story alone, it is, again, powerful and provocative. And if you can connect that to your people, to your point, that compensation challenge doesn't go away,
no,
but it falls in the right priority.
Right.
I have signed up to fight dirty with a team. And there's a million different stories. Like those are 3 words, and those are the ones that we use at Beyond Clean to do it. But like our name, Beyond Clean, is a story, right? Yep. We're taking things past just clean. It's the whole vision of sterile processing.
Yep.
Like your company, Healthmark, right? Like there's a story in that name.
That's right.
In sterile processing, like all of these things that we like know are words and that we throw out every day, and there's concepts and everything else. I really want to encourage folks to look at the words around us and develop that discipline to just look deeper, to really like sit down and think, what am I asking my people to do today? Like, what do these words on my mission statement mean? Are they just words on a paper that's gathering dust? Or do we really believe in customer service and quality and consistency? And if so, how do I tell a story about quality and consistency that can help my staff get it? And I guess the last thing I'll say is really applicable to everyone in the industry around this idea of telling stories is don't be afraid, and you will have to tell the story again and again and again. You cannot just tell a story one time. We're all like little kids. If it's a good story, we want to hear it again, right? Tell me that story, Daddy, about that one day, because I just love when you tell that story. It's the same thing for us. We've got to be willing to tell the story again and again and again and again, because it's a new day, it's new challenges, it's new context for our people, and it will not get boring if it's an engaging enough and creative enough story.
That's right. I agree completely. And I think about so many of my experiences and so many little stories that I've had to infuse into talks and things like that, because I really think that those are what drives home the points for people, because that's what we can all relate to. When my department was fortunate too, you were a SPD Department of the Year for HPN. I mean, that's amazing. But how does that happen? You had to tell a story. I've read those stories, not just yours, but the others as well. They're lengthy, they're important, they're detailed, there's data behind them. And I had to do the same thing for my department. We were finishing up a year and I was reflecting back on all of our quality numbers and our projects. And I just happened to see, oh my gosh, these were amazing strides. And I had to end up sitting down and writing the story out to submit it to ISHM. Like, these are real world things that happen because we sat down and took the time to not only look at what happened, but then tell the story. And then that becomes a story that you can tell to upper level management or the operating room or whatever the case may be. And not only that, but articles, and you can share that inspiration across an entire industry. And that's what's so cool about it. One of my former managers was great, and that she was a great communicator, and she also inspired me to get better at it. And she always said, if you don't manage your message, someone else will do it for you. And that's part of it. It's telling that story, because if you don't, they're going to assume the worst. Why do I report these quality issues? They don't do anything about it, right? That's because you're not up there telling them what you're doing about it, And I'm sure you have other examples as well. I mean, do any like real actual examples come to your mind? I'm sure there's so many that flood your memory, but one that you would like to really share with the audience to really hit the point home.
I mean, outside of the conversation I just mentioned, like about Beyond Clean, right? Like, sure. That's its own powerful story.
Yes.
Of the vision, for education and for networking around the industry, and obviously, but yeah, there's hundreds of them throughout my career, because like every instance is a story.
Yes.
And it can have small impacts, it can have big impacts. But here's one that a lot of folks will be able to connect with, I guess, is in 2015, I was the manager of the Jewish hospital there in Louisville, Kentucky. In Louisville, Kentucky, if you don't know, it is the home of the Kentucky Derby. So we're all about horse racing there in Louisville. At that same time, I wanted to drive my staff to get certified, not just certifying. I wanted them to get all the certifications that were available in 2015, and there was 3 of them through the ISHM group. So what did I do? Did I say, Kevin, hey, let's do a 3 certification project and everyone can get 3 certifications? Nope. What I did is I looked around me, pulled some cultural the cultural illusions, right, from Louisville, Kentucky, and said, we're into horse racing. We all know what the Triple Crown is in horse racing. So let me create a Triple Crown program for my technicians that if you get all 3 certifications, we're going to have this big award ceremony. You're going to actually have an award. We're going to call down the president of the hospital. We're going to put it in the newsletter. We're going to make a big freaking deal about you getting the Jewish Hospital Triple Crown certification. Well, what happened? 2015, Isham had a cover story about Triple Crown certification that we were doing there at Jewish Hospital, and it's taken on a life of its own. So now there is a thing for everyone in the globe who's Isham certified 3 certifications is Triple Crown certification. Like, that's a story. That's one story that I told to my technicians and my team to inspire them to do something great. It has impacted an entirely separate organization and thousands of folks around the globe. And I had no idea, right, when I told that story or when I created that project that it was going to happen there, but it has. And I cannot overstate the importance of a story. Even if that would not have happened, the fact that Arlene Sisney in our department was one of the first Triple Crown certified technicians, had not gone to college, was not one of those folks that you would look at and say, oh yeah, like she's the top performer in our department, but she got a hold of that vision and set the standard in the entire department for what passion and education and certification look like. That was mission accomplished way back then for Triple Crown. And man, it's gotten so much bigger. So don't underestimate the impact that those stories and those illusions can make for your team.
Gosh, Hank, I think that is actually a great story to end the episode on, because that is the perfect illustration. Not only did you mention, obviously, your company, I mean, your company has grown into a company by telling stories, but you also had the quote unquote real world. Not all of us are entrepreneurs, so it's hard for everyone to relate to starting a company or whatever, but they can relate to driving such an enormous project in their SPD. And that is just fantastic. I remember that going on at that time. I remember the cover of that Isham Process magazine. Maybe it was Communique back then, but I remember the graphic. I remember all of it. I remember the story that went with it. And gosh, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. I think that if people aren't inspired by that to start practicing that skill of storytelling, and just like you said, there are hundreds, like take one little thing and keep building on it, or keep telling it and get better at it. There's so many reasons to tell stories. Don't let people think you're doing nothing in SPD. Tell your story. And again, Hanks, thank you so much for being on the show and inviting yourself. I should have invited you long ago, but I appreciate you inviting yourself and being a guest on the show. It's awesome.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you for telling stories and for creating your own platform to let other folks tell their stories as well. So I appreciate it again.
That wraps up our interview with Beyond Clean founder Hank Balch. We had a great discussion about the importance of storytelling and how it is an essential skill as a technician or leader in the sterile processing industry. Hank shared numerous examples of how this skill could be put into practice, and even how it could be so simple and yet so impactful. I hope you are now inspired to develop your ability to use stories to move your career and your department forward. I want to thank you all for listening to the show. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. All opinions expressed on this show are those of the presenters. Before using any medical device, it is important to review the device manufacturer's instructions for use.